All right, so you've probably seen the HOA horror stories online of people getting fined over holiday decorations or painting their fence the wrong color. And sure, that stuff definitely exists in some places, but here in Kansas, the reality is a lot more normal than the internet makes it seem like. And hey, real quick, if you haven't met me yet, I'm Caleb. I'm a local real estate agent and a dad raising a family here in Wichita. And today I'm gonna give you the real scoop on what HOAs are actually like around here. And we're gonna talk about the good, the annoying, and how to know if the neighborhood that you're looking at is going to be a good fit or a total headache for your family. And I'm also gonna break down the 3 types of HOAs that you'll find here around the Wichita area, from the super laid back ones to the full maintenance provided communities that you can find around town. And so if you're thinking about moving into a neighborhood with an HOA in Kansas, this video will save you a lot of stress. And hey, real quick, before we get into the video, I wanna let you know about 2 free resources I have for you. One is my Wichita community guide. It talks about Wichita and the surrounding areas and everything you need to know. And then I've also got a weekly newsletter where I let you know all the cool things happening each weekend, as well as new developments and things as they come up. So you can find links to those in the description below. Okay, let's get into it. So what does an HOA actually do? At the simplest level, it's just a group that's set up to take care of the shared parts of the neighborhood and keep things looking nice. And in Kansas, most HOAs fall under a state law called the Kansas Uniform Common Interest Owners Bill of Rights Act, which basically just sets some ground rules so owners have fair notice, open meetings, and a say in how things are run in the development. And the biggest reason that HOAs even exist is to protect the look and the feel of the neighborhood that you live in, because nobody wants to buy a home and then wake up one day to find that the front yard is full of broken down cars or knee-high in weeds. And so a good HOA steps in long before things like that get bad, which helps protect the value of your home. But here in the Wichita area, a lot of HOAs are actually pretty relaxed. And in my own neighborhood, for example, the HOA mostly exists just so that there is a system in place if someone is truly causing issues that is affecting everyone else. And the rest of the time, they're really just staying hands off unless something becomes a real problem. And on the positive side, many neighborhoods around places like Andover, Bel Aire, Maize, and East Wichita use their dues to provide things that families actually enjoy in the neighborhood, like a pool, a clubhouse, walking paths, or a playground. And in my neighborhood, for example, our dues are less than $150 a year, and pretty much all it covers is maintenance of the common area mowing and taking care of the sign out front. But other neighborhoods have ponds that you can fish in, trails to walk around, and clubhouses that you can rent out for parties for just a small deposit. And these are the kinds of things that turn a neighborhood into a real community, and in Kansas, you usually get them for a fraction of what people pay in other parts of the country. So when it's done right, an HOA is not just about giving some people control of the whole neighborhood, it's about keeping the neighborhood nice and giving families things to enjoy and making it easy to know your neighbor. Now, even though most HOAs around Wichita are pretty relaxed, there are still times when things can get a little bit annoying, especially if you're in a development where the board gets strict about small things. Now, I haven't personally ever gotten a notice from my HOA, but I've helped plenty of clients who have. And one family in particular closed on their new home, and they pretty quickly got a letter in the mail because a small tree in their front yard had died. So the letter from the HOA reminded them that every home in the neighborhood had to have at least one tree out front, so they had to buy a new one and get it planted within a certain amount of time. And then I had another client who told me they've gotten reminders for leaving their trash cans out too long after the pickup day. And these are not like nightmare situations, but they are little things that you trade for a neighborhood that stays clean and consistent. But the real issues start when an HOA becomes inconsistent or communication seems to start lacking. For example, we've had neighborhoods right here in Wichita where people were frustrated because the board wasn't holding meetings at all, and they weren't sharing any financial information, or they weren't keeping up with basic maintenance around the neighborhood. And that created a lot of tension among the neighbors. You also hear about situations in the area where someone gets approved for a project like solar panels or fence or painting their house, and then later the board changes directions and starts issuing fines. And on top of all of that, if an HOA doesn't save enough money for big repairs in the development, they can issue what's called a special assessment, which is basically a surprise bill for everyone in the neighborhood to cover those things. But I would say overall, most Wichita HOAs try to avoid that, but it can still happen if they are mismanaged. So even in good neighborhoods, you give up a little bit of freedom with things like parking a camper outside or putting up a shed or changing your exterior paint color whenever you want. But ultimately, a good HOA will be very reasonable and fair in making those decisions. They just want you to run it by them first. The real problems come when the rules are enforced unevenly, or the communication gets messy, or finances are a disaster. And that's why it's so important to understand what you're walking into before you buy a home. in a development with an HOA. So what's the real story with HOAs here in Kansas, especially those in the Wichita area? The truth is that most of them are more relaxed, like I talked about. They're very affordable and low drama, and they're nothing like the stories that you hear online in other parts of the country. And they generally fall into one of three main categories. For the first one, you have the basic, inexpensive HOAs that you see in places like Maize, Valley Center, Goddard, and a lot of Wichita subdivisions. These usually cost just a couple $100s a year, and they mainly just exist to take care of the entryway landscaping, a small pond, or the neighborhood sign. The rules in these are pretty simple, and they only tend to step in if something actually becomes a problem, like I talked about in my HOA, and I would say these are the most common one in general. And then next on the list, you have the amenity style HOAs that are common in areas like Andover, Bel Aire, and East Wichita. These typically have things that families can actually use, like a neighborhood pool, a clubhouse that you can rent out for parties, walking paths, and a playground. And costs for these can vary, but many of them are still very reasonable, anywhere from $30 to $40 a month to maybe a few $100s for the entire year, just depending on what's included. And finally, for the third type, you have the full service maintenance provided communities, which you see a lot in patio home and villa neighborhoods around Wichita. And these have some of the highest fees because they handle a ton of things for you, like the mowing, the snow removal. Some do sprinkler maintenance, include the trash. And sometimes they even include exterior items like putting new siding and painting the house. And obviously, because you're getting a lot more, you're paying more money. So these can be up to a couple $100s a month, but you get your weekends back by not having to do any maintenance yourself. So the point is that here in Kansas, you really do have options when it comes to living in an HOA. You can live in a laid back neighborhood with super low dues. You can choose something with great amenities for kids, or you can pick a community where almost everything is handled for you. The key is just knowing which type fits your lifestyle before you buy a house. All right, now let's move on to the most important part of this whole video. So if you are even thinking about buying a home in a Kansas HOA, there are three things that you need to do to know exactly what you are getting into. First, you need to read the covenants and the bylaws for the community. And I know nobody wants to sit down with a big packet of rules, but this is a contract that you are agreeing to live by if you buy a home in that community. And you want to look for the stuff that actually matters to your lifestyle. So if you have a camper, check the parking rules. If you want a shed, build a fence, or put up a playset for the kids, make sure that those projects are allowed in the area. And if you have certain paint colors you love, check that too. And a pro tip, whenever I'm touring homes and people are saying, hey, I want to put up a fence, some people may want a wrought iron fence, or they might want a wood privacy fence, but not every neighborhood allows one of those types of fences. Honestly, you can just look around and see, do other neighbors have what you are wanting to do? That doesn't necessarily mean it's allowed, but it means it's a lot more likely. Okay, the second thing you might want to do is take a quick look at the finances for the neighborhood, because you have a right to see the HOA's budget and their total savings. So you might want to ask if they have enough money set aside for future repairs, or if there are any big projects coming up that might affect you. And if they share financials with you and the bank account is basically empty, that might be a sign that you could get hit with a special assessment like I mentioned down the road. And third, you want to drive the neighborhood and talk to the people that actually live there. You can learn a lot just by cruising through on a weekend or a weekday evening and asking people who live there, like, what are the common areas like and how are they maintained? Are the homes kept nice, looking like they are when you're there touring the houses? You might also ask them firsthand, like, how is the experience with the HOA? Are they overbearing or pretty laid back? A quick 5-minute conversation with a future neighbor is often more honest and helpful than anything that you'll read in their HOA documents. So if you follow these 3 steps, you'll know exactly what kind of neighborhood that you're getting into before you buy the house. So at the end of the day, an HOA is just a tool, and here in Kansas, it can be a really good one when it's run the right way. And most HOAs around Wichita are made up of just regular neighbors who want the same things that you do. They want a clean neighborhood, a safe place for their kids to play, and a community people actually enjoy living in. So if you just take the time to read the rules, look at the finances, and talk to the folks who already live there, you can find a neighborhood where the HOA works in your favor and makes life a little easier for your family. And so with that being said, I'd love to hear your stories as well. Are you in an HOA around Wichita, or are you thinking about buying into one? Drop a comment down below and let me know your thoughts about HOAs. And if you have questions about HOAs in our area, I'd love to be a resource for you. And lastly, if you're planning to make a move to Wichita or just moving around in the city, I would love to be your agent. If you don't have one already, you can reach out to me. All of my information is in the description below. I'm always happy to have a conversation and get things rolling for you if I can help. So there you have it. That's all for this video. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you on the next one.